When you move into a new home, it can be exciting and sometimes a little creepy to find things left behind by the previous owners, especially when those things are hidden away beneath the floors and behind the walls. In the case of one Norwegian couple we'll be discussing today, what they found under their floorboards was much more unnerving than they initially thought. So, stay tuned to find out what they discovered, alongside a whole host of other unbelievable and slightly chilling secrets people unearthed in and around their homes. In May 2020, the Christiansens, a married couple from Volda, Norway, decided to counteract their lockdown boredom by installing some insulation under their floors. But what their DIY project led to, they couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams. The Christiansens were tearing up their floorboards when they found what appeared to be part of an old toy car underneath. They knew it was old since the floorboards hadn't been moved since the house was built in 1914, but they had no idea how ancient it would turn out to be. Shortly after making that first discovery, the Christiansens also stumbled upon an iron axe head, which ultimately convinced them to contact local authorities. Experts from Norway's Tromsø Museum were sent over to examine the finds, and when they started digging, they found even more peculiar-looking artifacts. From ancient remains to iron arrowheads, everything dated back to the Viking Age between 800 and 1100 AD. The old toy car wheel, meanwhile, was actually a decorative glass bead from the same time. But what was everything doing under the ground? According to archaeologists, the Christiansens were sitting atop an ancient Viking burial site, also known as a cairn, commonly identified by a pile of stones like these ones they found under the house. Cairns were a very common burial practice in the Iron Age and served as a predecessor to the headstones we know today. Usually, the deceased were laid in a boat, and piles of stones and soil were laid atop the remains. Although no boat was found on this occasion, it likely already disintegrated over the centuries. According to archaeologist Jørn Erik Henriksen, Viking burial sites are not uncommon in Norway, though they're rarely found under houses, making this particular discovery all the more fascinating. I just hope that by disturbing the burial site, the Christiansens didn't unleash the wrath of an ancient Viking ghost upon themselves. Even if they didn't, some of the people we'll be looking at next might just have unleashed a few ghosts of their own. Black hole. If you thought your 2020 was bad, just ask 67-year-old Chris Town from Guildford, Connecticut, who reached new lows that year, quite literally. One day, Chris and his wife Angela were helping a friend of theirs assemble a bed on the ground floor of the 19th century home she was renting when the pair started to hear a strange creaking noise below them. When Chris looked down, it was already too late. The floor gave way beneath his feet, and his wife watched in horror as her husband disappeared before her eyes. She immediately called 911, frantically telling a dispatcher that her husband had fallen into a black hole, which it basically was. When firefighters arrived, they found Chris 20 feet down in a hidden well, barely keeping his head above water by using his legs to brace himself against the surrounding walls. The firefighters quickly lowered a harness and used a pulley system attached to a ceiling joist to lift the 67-year-old to safety. But even though Chris emerged with only minor injuries, the question remained, what the heck was a well doing under the floorboards? According to property records, the house was built in 1843, a time when wells were often found next to or under buildings as a private water source. Most likely, the house was at one point extended, covering the well, though clearly not sturdily enough, and slowly forgotten about. The home's previous owner, who sold the house in 2015 after living there for 42 years, said she was stunned to learn about the well. So either that owner was super light-footed, or there's an underlying problem somewhere. Did someone say termites? Soggy encounter. In the early 80s, Reddit user Evil English often visited his grandparents at their second home in rural Tennessee. Whenever he was there, he loved reading the classic novel Treasure Island with his grandmother. And, like most kids, the Redditor often fantasized about one day discovering a hidden treasure of his own. Little did he know, his dream would one day come true. Shortly after both his grandparents passed away, Evil English inherited the Tennessee property, but ultimately decided to sell it. While preparing the house for viewings, the Redditor was removing some carpet from a closet under the stairs when he noticed a peculiar slab of concrete amid the hardwood floors. In the middle, there was a round metal plate covering something. On removing the plate, he made an amazing discovery. There, hidden in the floor, was a safe. Evil English quickly called a locksmith to break the safe open, and what he found legitimately stunned him. Inside the safe, the Redditor unearthed watches, jewelry, some soggy bills, and a hoard of collectible coins. After sorting through it all, Evil English had no idea whether his findings were really worth anything, so he turned to the trusty Reddit community. Some Redditors advised Evil English to take the soggy bills to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing to have them replaced, whereas others pointed out the possibility of selling the piles of coins he found to willing collectors, potentially racking up a couple $1,000s. While the final outcome was never shared online, it wasn't so much the treasure's value that mattered to Evil English, but rather the fact that his childhood dream finally came true. And who knows, maybe the entire hoard was a secret gift left by his grandmother for him to find. I mean, after all those years of reading Treasure Island together, she was bound to have picked up a few tricks. Before we go digging after some more hidden treasures, how about giving yourself something valuable by subscribing to Be Amazed and pressing the notification bell? That way, you won't miss any of my latest uploads. All done? Then prepare yourself for what our next lucky finders discovered tucked away in their walls. Top Shelf Discoveries. When Nick Drummond and Patrick Baker of Ames, New York, were informed of the town gossip that their more than a century-old home was built by a bootlegger, they passed it off as a small-town legend. In case you didn't know, bootlegger is a term for someone who illegally made or distributed alcohol during the time of America's prohibition in the early 20th century. But shortly after Nick and Patrick made some home renovations in October 2020, a year after they moved in, the couple realized the legend could be true. One day, Nick was removing the outside skirting along the bottom of the entryway when a package wrapped in brown paper fell out. Understandably, Nick immediately tore into it, but he wasn't prepared for what he found. Wrapped in the paper was an old green whiskey bottle still with the seal on, which, admittedly, didn't seem all that impressive on its own. It was only when Nick removed another plank along the skirting that he noticed identical packages stretching all the way around. Nick immediately thought of the local legend and realized they had stumbled upon the bootlegger's secret stash. All in all, 7 bundles of 6 bottles each were found behind the skirting and 4 more under the floorboards, making 66 bottles in total. After some research, Nick learnt the bootlegger was one Count Adolf Humpfner, a German immigrant shrouded in mystery who died suddenly in 1932. The Prohibition-era liquor was aptly labeled Old Smuggler Gaelic Whiskey, a Scottish brand still in production today. Incredibly, the full bottles were estimated at a value of around a whopping $1,000 each, meaning the couple could have potentially come away with $66,000. Of course, they ended up keeping one of the bottles to taste test, because I mean, if whiskey ages well, why not try some that's been under your house for almost a century? The floor is lava. In 2017, when James and Suzanne Brierly purchased a 10-acre property in Bend, Oregon, they had no idea that there was something truly spectacular lurking beneath their feet. And they only found out about it 4 years later in 2021, right as they were about to sell the place. When they first moved in, the realtor informed James and Suzanne about a cave located close to the house, but the couple never paid it much attention. After all, the entrance to the cave was a small, ordinary-looking hole in the side of a neighboring hill. Nothing to really pique one's interest. It was only one day, when James decided to check the cave out, that the Brierlys realized what they'd been missing. As James crawled inside, expecting a tight squeeze, the cave turned out to be so large he couldn't reach the ceiling even when standing up. But its astonishing size wasn't the only remarkable thing about the cave. Turns out the cave was an empty lava tube formed millions of years ago by molten lava that flowed underground from the Newberry volcano 20 miles away. After discovering the lava tube, James and Suzanne were left pondering how they might have used all the secret additional space. But since they were still selling the property, they only hoped future owners would tap into its greater potential. As of June 2021, the property was up for sale at $1.8 million, and the lava tube, located close to the house, was advertised as a possible renovation into either a wine cellar, bed and breakfast, or a concert hall. But what would you use a secret underground cave like this for? My vote's on evil villain lair / karaoke lounge. I mean, just imagine the natural reverb. Panic room. For Jake Brown, a resident of Plymouth, England, what started as a laid-back day in May 2020 quickly turned into an adventure in his own home. While having a morning coffee outside the front door of his basement-level property, Jake noticed a patch in the wall with a completely different texture under the stairs leading up to the street. So he grabbed a drill and made a pair of peepholes in the wall, one for viewing and another for a torch. But as he peeked through the holes, Jake realized he didn't just stumble upon some tiny crevice. Beyond the wall, he looked straight into a dusty, room-sized cavern, and you bet he opened that sucker up. After a bit more drilling and a few carefully placed blows with a hammer, Jake made a hole large enough to climb through. He flashed his torch around the place and quickly realized the 10-foot-high, 16-foot-deep room had been sealed for many, many years. Aside from some building waste, like guttering, broken doors, and an old bicycle, Jake's most exciting discovery were some vintage paint cans from the 50s and 60s, the remains of a newspaper from 1964, and bottles dating all the way back to the early 1900s. A historian friend of Jake's, who oddly happened to possess detailed knowledge of the area, revealed that most of the houses in the neighborhood were built with underground spaces to use as wine cellars or bathing areas. Now, considering most of us already have bathrooms nowadays, I doubt a bathing area would be of much use now. But I'd say Jake just knocked through into an opportunity for the perfect man cave. Scaly crawl space. On a particularly windy evening in March 2019, an unidentified Texas homeowner was experiencing trouble with their TV signal. Thinking the cable connection was likely to blame, the homeowner decided to crawl under their house to the cable box to see if they could fix it. But just as quickly as they got into the crawl space, they retreated again in absolute terror. Why? Because the crawl space was absolutely teeming with rattlesnakes, a whopping 45 of them to be precise. The homeowner quickly got Nathan Hawkins at Big Country Snake Removal on the line, and when Nathan arrived with his team, even they were shocked by the situation. With so many rattlesnakes in the crawl space, Nathan knew his team had to be extremely careful, and it's easy to see why. Those rattlers do not seem happy about their sudden eviction notice. One by one, Nathan and his team grabbed the snakes and pulled them to safety. It took 2 bins and a bucket to hold all 45 snakes, and once they'd been secured, Nathan drove them out to a safe location where he released them. According to him, all Texans need to conduct regular inspections of their crawl spaces, especially in the months leading up to winter, when rattlesnakes like to stow away together in large numbers for warmth. At the end of the day, Nathan said, rattlesnakes don't care how nice your house is or what kind of car you drive. They only care about survival. And they don't take too kindly to being disturbed once they're in. Ducktails. A 50th anniversary is traditionally known as the Golden Year, and no one knows this better than California-based contractors Clark and Rush Mechanical. In 2013, shortly after the business turned 50, a company technician, Steve Otley, was out examining some ductwork on an air conditioning installation at a local house when he stumbled upon some truly surprising treasure. Over a dozen baby food jars, filled to the brim with not baby food, but strange small rocks, almost powdery in appearance with a peculiar golden hue. The moment Steve saw it, he knew in his gut it was pure gold. Soon, his suspicions would be proven exactly correct. But he didn't let greed get the better of him and immediately alerted the homeowners to his discovery. While the residents were previously completely unaware of the treasure's existence, they gleefully accepted their newfound fortune, which ended up being worth a staggering $300,000. The origin of the gold still remains a mystery, but it's believed to date back to the 1950s when the house was first built. Quite possibly, the owner could have been a gold prospector, or more likely, a jeweler who collected all the golden scraps from cutting and scraping their projects and stowed it away for a rainy day. But ultimately, possibly due to a sudden demise or having to move away in a hurry, never retrieved it. Can you believe Steve was that honest to give up over $250,000? For his sake, I certainly hope he got a hefty tip. Another day on the job. One day in April 2021, Border Patrol agents at a Texas checkpoint were going about their jobs when an ordinary-looking truck with a flatbed trailer came past, and they stopped it for a routine inspection. As the agents were conducting their checks, their accompanying police dogs started to get restless, all homing in on a particular spot in the trailer, which had nothing but a few bags and tarps thrown over it. But seeing as they knew their dogs were seldom mistaken, the agents got to work removing the trailer's floorboards. And that's when an ordinary day on the job took a truly extraordinary turn. Under the floorboards, the patrol agents discovered 20 undocumented immigrants, of which 2 were children, crammed together with seemingly no room to move. But thankfully, all alive and well. Most of them held their arms down along their bodies to make more room in the trailer, which appeared to be no more than 18 inches deep. As shocking and almost mildly impressive as this was, however, the authorities are extremely adamant about how dangerous attempts like these to illegally migrate to a new home can become. The origins of the migrants, as well as their destinations, were never disclosed, but that doesn't change the fact that any of them could have easily suffocated or been seriously injured had the trailer somehow gotten into trouble on the road. Plus, for anyone who gets seriously carsick, I couldn't imagine a more hellish journey. As much as they probably hated their plan failing, I'm sure the migrants were at the very least slightly relieved for that horribly uncomfortable ride to finally be over. Voodoo discoveries. After their father's death in 2011, the children of Michael Halbarian, the last owner of New York's Steinway Mansion, called in a few auctioneers to sell the mansion's contents. Little did they know, their father might have been hiding something firmly on the creepy side. While clearing out the attic, the auctioneers came across what looked like a 19th century wooden box. Thinking nothing of it and more interested about the contents, they broke the lock and opened it. And oh boy, were they left shuddering at what they found inside. Staring back at the auctioneers from the inside of the box were 4 voodoo masks and a doll surrounded by rusty nails. The auctioneers immediately felt uneasy, given that, besides the general fear of being cursed one might get from a voodoo discovery like this, the wax the masks were made from had an intensely unsettling resemblance to real skin. Thankfully, though, they were definitely made of wax. When the auctioneers told the Halbarians about their find, the family members all denied the box being their father's, which is arguably a little suspicious, but still possible. Because the box was located in the attic, it could easily have been up there since the late 19th century, back when the house belonged to a certain Benjamin T. Pike, a marketer and catalog publisher, although too little is known about his life to be certain. Ultimately, and understandably, the Halbarian family didn't want anything to do with the masks, so the auctioneers decided to hold on to them. After all, they could be worth a lot to the right buyer, seeing as voodoo masks are considered to be of high spiritual importance to practitioners of voodoo. Traditionally worn during religious practices to represent the spirits of ancestors or to control good and evil within their community, the masks were far from your average attic trinket. But with the associations between voodoo dolls and other voodoo paraphernalia with malevolent curses, I certainly know that if it were me making the discovery, I'd be rid of them as soon as possible. The Lost Box of Loch Ness. Situated on the southeast side of Scotland's Loch Ness, Boleskine House was built in the 18th century and at its peak served as the grounds for many occult magic rituals as conducted by the building's most famous inhabitant, occultist and supernatural enthusiast Aleister Crowley. When a seller on eBay claims to have found a peculiar box under the building's floorboards after the place mysteriously caught a flame in 2015, 41-year-old Rick Spencer from Grimsby, England, jumped at the opportunity to purchase it. Why? Because the hexagram carvings on the box's lid and the melted wax that sealed it all pointed to the spellbinding supernatural practices of one man, Aleister Crowley. Before Rick opened the box, he surrounded it with a circle of salt to keep any alleged dark energies from escaping. With shaky hands, he broke the seal and opened the box, and its contents were every bit as creepy as its outside suggested. On the inside, Rick found a voodoo-looking doll, some vegetation, and a rather disturbing drawing of a dark-eyed demonic figure. Needless to say, it was every bit as creepy as he'd hoped. Only after doing some research, Rick came to a disappointing realization. The sketch was almost identical to the demonic antagonist of the 2012 horror film Sinister, which meant it couldn't be related to Aleister at all. It seemed the drawing, at least, was the work of a charlatan. Still, Rick hadn't given up hope that the other items might be real. According to him, the ritualistic sealing of the box was so authentic looking, it must have been done by a real occultist. Now, I don't want to say we've got a second Loch Ness Monster situation on our hands, but a cursed box sealed with black magic? I'm starting to think there's something strange in Scottish drinking water. Home expansion. When Tal and Uriah Shimshoni first bought their house in Ein Kerem, Jerusalem in the early 2010s, they knew it needed some serious fixing up. Only, like the Norwegian couple we met at the start of this video, their renovations didn't get that far before a seriously surprising discovery diverted their attention. While workers were breaking up the flooring one day, the jackhammer suddenly disappeared. It plunged down into the darkness, down a big gaping hole that, according to the deeds of the house at least, wasn't supposed to be there. But the hole wasn't even the most shocking part. As the Shimshonis dug further, they realized they had stumbled upon something with great importance. There, beneath their house, they were staring at an old Jewish ritual bath about 5 feet deep, 11 feet long, and almost 8 feet wide. Not sure what to make of the bath, Uriah and Tal called the Israel Antiquities Authority, who immediately came out and excavated their discovery. To everyone's astonishment, the bath was dated at over 2,000 years old and was thought to have been originally constructed in a private home in a 1st century Jewish village. More intriguingly, the bath's discovery supported the Christian tales linking Ein Kerem with the birthplace of John the Baptist, the mentor of Jesus. Up until then, there had been no archaeological proof supporting the notion that a Jewish community was indeed living in Ein Kerem during that time, which really made the bath an impressive find. Since then, the Shimshonis have often invited the press into their home, where they've actually installed a trap door leading down into the ancient ritual chamber. Surprisingly enough, the bath still fills up with water in the winter, although neither Tal nor Uriah have any idea where it actually comes from. Most likely, the water comes from the ground, as the water table, the underground boundary between the soil surface and underground water supply, rises in the winter months. But I mean, if they can't stop the water, why not embrace it? They'll definitely save money on their water bill in the winter. And any bath in such a holy location is sure to feel twice as refreshing, right? Have you ever made a mysterious discovery in or around your home? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching.